Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tammy Wilson from the Sacramento County Office of Education, and I'm the project lead for the California Dyslexia Initiative. We are so excited to have so many colleagues and friends from across California and even other locations join us for this learning opportunity. Our 2022-23 expert webinar series is focused on identifying risk factors, setting up effective MTSS RTI school systems to prevent reading difficulties, and delivering research-based instruction to support and remediate struggling learners and students at risk for and with dyslexia. Today, we are so excited to feature Kareem Weaver. I know that Kareem will leave us with much to think about and pondering what we all can do to improve literacy rates for all students. To support our attendees, we've created a Padlet, and Wynn will drop that in the chat so that you can access the webinar companion document as well as the slides. Our recordings of our webinars are posted following the week, about a week after the session, so you can check back, and sometimes they're even up there sooner. Next slide, please. The Sacramento County office, as I mentioned, is the lead for the California Dyslexia Initiative, and our goal is really to provide knowledge, skill, and capacity around teaching and supporting students with dyslexia and students at risk for dyslexia. We are delighted to partner with our friends at Glean Education to deliver this expert webinar series. And I'd like to hand it off to my friend and colleague, Jessica Hammond, founder and CEO of Glean, who has been leading the coordination of these efforts. Next slide.
Thank you, Tammy. We are thrilled to partner with SCOE and the California Dyslexia Initiative to coordinate this webinar series for the second year in a row. For those of you who may not know us, Glean Education partners with schools, districts, and states to deliver online training, school leader consulting, and web-based coaching. Our work aims to build educator understanding of evidence-based literacy practices to improve student literacy outcomes. This webinar, next slide please, is the third in a series of webinars this year on understanding dyslexia within an MTSS framework. If you haven't registered for them yet, we'll be putting the registration links in the chat so you can be sure not to miss them. Next slide, please. It is my pleasure to introduce Kareem Weaver. He is the co-founder and executive director of Fulcrum. He previously led the Western region for New Leaders, a leader development organization that supports the professional growth of teachers and administrators. Prior to New Leaders, Kareem was an award-winning teacher and administrator in Oakland, California, and Columbia, South Carolina. Kareem has an undergraduate degree from Morehouse College and a master's degree in clinical community psychology from the University of South Carolina. He is a member of the Oakland NAACP Education Committee and a senior visiting fellow at the National Council on Teacher Quality. His professional heroine is the late, great Marva Collins. Please help me in welcoming Kareem Weaver.
Thank you very much, Jessica and Tammy. I appreciate you and those kind words. And I'm really looking forward to this. I hope I can provide something useful and thought-provoking to those who are out there watching and those who watch later online in whatever format. But this is a real honor to be here, and I really applaud you for the work you all are doing, not just today, but with the entire series. And let's get started. Let's get started. So you see the title for today, Dyslexia, Structured Literacy, and Equity. And, you know, what does that mean? How are those things related? Are they related? And today I want to delve into those things, as I've been asked to do, a little bit more deeply to bring some awareness and some understanding, both to the topic of dyslexia, but then how it also ties into the conversation around equity. So, you know, as Jessica mentioned, I'm also a member of the NAACP. I encourage everyone to join, go check it out. It's the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. What many people don't know is that the NAACP has been aware of dyslexia as a serious issue for a while. In fact, I know in California, we have resolutions at the state level, but nationally, as an organization, all the branches and state conferences are under the leadership of the national organization. Nationally, in 2014, the NAACP put forward a resolution on dyslexia. This is something that we vote on with all of our delegates and send it forward to Congress. But I just want to share a little bit with you before I really jump in the meat of things. But I just kind of want to frame this. The organization mentioned in 2014 that, illiteracy is a problem. And we all know this, but this isn't something new. This is something that's been going on for years. And a little further down, it talked about the fact that, roughly 20% or 1 out of every 5 folks are struggling with this. Now, I know dyslexia is a continuum, and it shows up in different ways. You also have dysgraphia, dyscalculia, et cetera. But about 1 out of every 5 are struggling with this. And this is according to their resolution. I just want to focus on this for a second. They said that it crosses all the lines. And so sometimes we think of dyslexia as only pertaining to a certain demographic. What the NAACP said clearly was that actually this affects everyone. But the diagnosis and treatment of it it's public schools haven't figured this out yet. And it really does impact those in the urban areas most disproportionately. So for a whole host of reasons I won't get into today. But if we don't support folks, if we don't support children who are struggling in this area, then they're in danger of falling through the cracks. And lastly, they identified this as an imperative. This is the reason why it's appropriate for the NAACP, for example, to get involved with this, is that this is a civil rights issue. So I just wanted to frame this first before I jump into my presentation. This is actually a civil rights webinar. Understanding of this, the solutions that children need, these are civil rights issues first and foremost, so that young people can access society. Okay, with that framing, let me jump into it. There are some terms that I really want to just center this entire presentation on: dyslexia, structural literacy, and equity. And then from those, I'll jump into different aspects of this topic. But first, what is it? And more importantly, how much do I, as an educator, whether I be as a superintendent or a school board member or a paraprofessional, a teacher, principal, union representative, what have you, how do I really have to get it? Do I need to have a master's degree in this? Do I, how important is this? The Department of Education in California has dyslexia guidelines that were adopted. And it really kind of spells out just how important this is and why we kind of have to really dig in here. And in those guidelines, I mean, you can Google it. And in chapter 9, it said something very important. It said that one of the greatest factors for low achievement in reading is we're not identifying in an early and accurate way kids that have dyslexia. So this is the California Department of Education just laying this out and saying, yeah, this is pretty important. And this is one of the reasons why student achievement in reading has really been, it hasn't been what we've wanted for years. So with that, what kind of responsibility does that invoke in us as a response to that? But that's the key question that we have to answer. That kind of frames just how important this is. And what is dyslexia? Really, it's just a different way of processing information. And it shows up. I mean, I mentioned earlier dyscalculia and dysgraphia, students, this shows up whether it's writing, whether it's math, working with numbers, whether it's reading. There's different aspects to this that we often ignore. So oftentimes we focus on dyslexia, but we don't think about dyscalculia or dysgraphia, for example. And Children may have a host of processing differences, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure they're provided with a free and appropriate public education that allows them to still have success, not just in the classroom, but then towards their life outcomes. But these are some of the things. It's a processing difference. It's really all it is. Okay. So with that being said, to put a little bit more meat on the bone, the National Center for Learning Disabilities defined it this way. They explained it this way, that it's neurological and often genetic. Right? It shows up as a disability in reading, but it's due to a configuration in the brain that really, it really impacts how we process sounds, and relatedly, symbols that represent those sounds, that we have chosen to represent those sounds. Okay, now that's, and you can see the link there. You're happy to go there if you want to and check it out, be my guest. But this is just to clarify terms and what we're really talking about. Because oftentimes there's some confusion about what dyslexia is. It's a processing difference. It's neurological in order, and it affects it, and it's genetic, oftentimes genetic, and it's just a matter of how we process sound and how we attribute symbols to those sounds and our ability to relate those things and then create patterns and ascribe meaning to those patterns. You know, having taught for quite a while, and then also having been a principal and supported educators in their journeys, you know, oftentimes we don't get good information about our practice, whether it's because we're not getting good feedback from the principal or the coaches or the assistant principals, or we may not have good data analysis protocols in our schools. We oftentimes don't get video feedback. And so it's sometimes we may not really see things in the way that children are experiencing them. And the feedback may be a little bit distorted. And so I use this image because, simply put, most of us are doing the best that we can in classrooms and in school buildings. And when we're doing the instructing and the leading, whether it's at the system level or the school level, if we're detached from the reality of things, we may have a different perception of what our standing is in terms of how we're supporting young people the way that we need. But we have to ask these questions. Is our instruction explicit? Is it systematic? And is it direct? And does it lay a strong foundation? And do we have goals around mastery? Do we have a mastery framework? Yes, I know there's a scope and sequence, and there's a timing involved, there's a cadence, and we go unit by unit, lesson by lesson, but what about mastery? Is that the goal at the sub-skill level, as well as in larger skill development items? The reason why that's important is because when you're talking about dyslexia, we do have to really wrestle with how the system historically has categorized young people. For most schools in America and in California, we're no different. We still leverage the discrepancy model, meaning when does the alarm bell go off? And historically, the alarm bell goes off when our children are a certain amount of learning behind. We've noticed it by whatever means, for assessment or observation, that the children aren't learning as we think they should. And that's the word I want to leverage, should. Because part of what the discrepancy model historically has leveraged is this idea of expectation. And who should be learning versus, and how much should they be learning versus who shouldn't, and how much shouldn't they be? Well, we actually filter that into the model for identifying students with special needs, particularly dyslexia. What is their IQ? What do we perceive their intelligence to be? And how far are they from that? And if the discrepancy is large, well, there's an issue, and we have to identify it and then pursue remediation of some sort. But given that most schools still use a version of this discrepancy model, it then becomes incumbent upon us to be aware of our expectations for children. Because if the expectations are different based on whatever factors they may be based upon, then the discrepancy may not be as apparent. To put it in layman's terms, if we don't expect anything from the kids, then there's no alarm. And so I really wanted to make sure that when we're talking about dyslexia, we have to understand not just what it is, but often how it's identified or how the red flags are or are not raised in a timely way. I'd like to introduce you to an example of this. This is Dr. Keon Anderson. You may know him. He's a published author and business owner. He's one of the people that is, I know colleges are going through applications right now. He's one of the readers for the UC system. He's a professor of Long Beach. And when you're listening to this short vignette from Dr. Anderson, I want you to think about three things. You see them there on the left. What's the messaging that the person was getting? What kind of assessment? How was it determined that the person was behind? How was it, and how did they know? And then how was it explained to them or to him? How was it explained to him? So what's the messaging? What was the assessment of where he was? And then what's the solution and how was that explained? So just have that frame as you listen to this.
So in K through 8, I received messages about me being unintelligent. I knew because I had been assessed that there was something wrong and that my brain did not necessarily work like everyone else's. But before 9th grade, I'd never had anybody sit me down and really explain, this is what dyslexia means. This is why you process things the way that you process them. These are the specific gaps that you have in order for me to be able to work on those things. So when I got to 9th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Obiagu, and she utilized the Linda Mubel program, which is pretty much like a decoding system, where we're taking it down to basic phonetic sounds, sight words, and those sorts of things. In addition to teaching me those basic skills, she really connected me to literature that I could identify with. When I got to high school, I was reading at a 2nd to 3rd grade reading level. I met Miss O. She helped me develop those basic skills, and within a year time frame, I was reading at about grade level. So going from reading at a 2nd grade reading level to almost being like 9th to 10th grade. By the time that I went to my 2nd year of high school, I was taking honors and AP classes, and by my junior year, I'd even taken some community college classes and landed an internship. Now, I know that my story is sort of an extreme story of growth over a very short period of time, but one of the things that I'm aware of is that those basic decoding skills are beneficial for all students.
Messaging. What messages are children receiving? How are we assessing them? And then how are they understanding and what's being explained to them about what the challenges are and how they potentially could overcome those challenges? I like to lift up Dr. Anderson's words because there are Dr. Andersons throughout our schools all across the country, different colors, religions, languages spoken, but the K-8 messaging, when and how do we assess and how is it explained? Do we screen or do we not screen? Do we message struggles and difficulty as failure, or is that for feedback? And then how do we choose to attribute those struggles? Do we say that students aren't intelligent? Do we say that students have, home challenges, trauma, et cetera? Or do we look for any differences in processing, or do we look for how they are navigating and using sound, and how their home language may tie into their experience as readers and as learners? Okay, so where we at so far? So just how important is this? It's important enough to take action on, right? Because it's a driver for student achievement. That's what the California Department of Education said. And then what is it? It's a neurological processing difference. It goes into how we perceive sounds and how we connect those sounds to symbols. So I just wanted to frame the answers that we've gotten so far, right? And then let's keep going to the second part. So now structured literacy. So how does this relate to it? So we've got structured literacy as a topic that people talk about I've heard people say science of reading or evidence-based practices, or I've heard all kinds of things, but what is it? And how does it connect to dyslexia? And what's necessary for us to take away from that? So I hope to answer some of those questions today. Is this it? I've heard this definition: systematic, word coding strategies or identification strategies, benefits most kids, vital for those, right? Is that it? Is that fully it? In fact, I've heard a lot of individuals and organizations get stuck here. That is just decoding. We just have to teach phonics. We have to, whatever that means, identification, decoding strategies. Is this it? And it's really, really important. If I don't get anything else through tonight, I want to make sure that people understand it. Yes, that's it and more. There's more to it than that. Structured literacy, a thing that benefits all. It's necessary for some. It's that, but it's also some more things. So I'm going to turn to the International Dyslexia Association. I recommend everyone to go to their different websites. It's an international organization, and they have a lot of great information about dyslexia, what causes some of the challenges and how to navigate those challenges. They have knowledge and practice standards. I really do encourage everyone to go to their website and check it out. So they broke it up into a couple of things. So one is the what, right? When we're talking about structured literacy, what is that? Well, you see the wheel and all the different pieces, right? The semantics, the phonology, the symbols, and syllables, morphology, syntax. You see that you're starting with phonology, I should say, and then going all the way around that wheel. Sure. And frankly, the red piece, which you see the arrow pointing to, is the one that oftentimes gets left out the most. Sound. How are we attending to the sounds? What are children hearing? We think they're hearing the same thing that the teacher hears, but oftentimes they're not. Oftentimes students have a processing difference, and they are perceiving and processing the sounds differently than the speaker intended them to. And so that's something that has to be navigated. So when we're talking about what structured literacy is, we really have to start with phonology and make sure that it includes all of these things. And frankly, students with dyslexia, oftentimes this red section is the biggest challenge. It's what are they hearing? And then later on, how are we attaching sounds to symbols? But that's the what of it. That's part of the what, a big piece for structured literacy. But then it's the how. It's not just what has to be covered. It's how we cover it. Now, let me go back. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, syntax matters, morphology, semantics. We can go from words to syllables. From syllables to words to sentences to paragraphs, the whole story. Great, wonderful. But how do we do it? Matters. And this is something that I think many folks overlook. Well, listen, I'm doing the things. Yes, we do phonology. Yes, we do phonics. Yes, we do this. And yes, we do oral language development. Yes, we do all of these things. But how are we doing? Are we doing it in a very explicit and systematic way? Is it building on itself? Like staircases. Are we leveraging, multi-sensory tools and techniques? Are we providing diagnostic support? Students with dyslexia need diagnostic support. Now we're talking about 1 in 5 kids. This is a lot of kids. So, and frankly, these things can benefit all learners. Now, some people will say, well, not everybody needs explicit instruction. Some you can be inferential. Fine. It will not hurt them to have something done explicitly or systematically or cumulatively. So this is the how. It's not just the what. It's also the way we navigate these things. And then there's the why to structured literacy. Right? You can have the what and you can have the how. But it's important to understand that if the goal is to get the greatest number of children possible, if we want all children, then we're doing all of these things in a systematic, explicit, direct way. So that's it. It's the what, the how, and the why. If we want to get all kids, if it's more than just a buzzword or a slogan or a district, a mission statement or what have you, then we have to do things in a way that we're going to catch as many kids as we can. Now, frankly, I love this image from IDA. I think it's great. And you could say, yes, Kareem, but there's more than that. There's phonology and sound symbols and syllables and morphology, syntax and semantics. Yes, and what about oral language development? What about, yes, these things have to be there. When we talk about the National Reading Panel, remember there were two versions of that National Reading Panel. There was one for the general population. There was a second one for language minority children, which really emphasized the importance of oral language development. That's got to be there too, across content, across subject matter. So these foundational elements must be there across the board. But on top of that, there are some other things that should also be taught systematically, explicitly, and directly. IDA has these standards, and this is just a screenshot of one of their sites. These knowledge and practice standards that some universities are really starting to adopt. Because IDA provides accreditation for universities. So, for example, if a school really wants to make sure that their folks are ready to go, that when they get into the field, they know how to teach a child to read, especially a child with dyslexia, then the program would set about doing certain things to show that they're getting their teachers ready for that. And then if it meets their standards, then they would be IDA accredited. And I just want to just name this because a lot of people don't know about this. Yes, these knowledge and practice standards are very, very good. You've got 5 key strands, and each of them is very, very important. I encourage everyone, go there, check it out. Feel free to set about your own course of learning. Ask your superintendent or your chief academic officer or your school board to allow you to not just engage with those standards, but provide enough professional development for mastery. Here are some universities right off the gate that have been endorsed or have been accredited through IDA. There are others who are in the process, and I'll mention one in just a second, but this is a very short list. I'm in California, and guess what? We don't have anybody on the list. These universities have fully met the standards. They have made sure that their coursework, that their methods classes are aligned to the knowledge and practice standards of IDA. It is the gold standard for universities. And so, if I'm an HR director and I see someone went to one of these schools and is applying for it, I couldn't hire them fast enough. And at the NAACP, we, the Oakland branch, we call these freedom schools because these schools are going about the business of ensuring the people that they develop and train and support are not just aligned to those standards, but they're able to meet a diverse array of learners' needs around literacy. I want to encourage everyone to check out this podcast. It's called Black and Dyslexic. Winford and Winford have been around for a while, but this is a relatively new iteration of their podcast. And there is an episode in particular, episode 16, where one of the directors from Morgan State University, which is a historically Black college in Maryland, who's on the path towards IDA certification. They're like a stone's throw away from it. And they talk about the process of adapting curriculum and changes that have to be made, both in terms of the technical changes, but also some of the change management that has to happen, and how this impacts parents, students, systems, and teachers. So I would encourage everyone to check that out, the Black and Dyslexic podcast. There's a free commercial for them. I think it's more than worth it. Okay, so we've talked about dyslexia, what it is. We've talked about structured literacy, both the what and the how that has to happen to make sure that it's appropriate for the greatest number of students. But now let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about equity. One of the things that the folks at SCOE and at Glean asked me to do was talk about equity and how this effort to ensure that everyone's kind of up to speed on what dyslexia is and how to address it, so that can be put into a frame of equity or a lens of equity. So let's do just that. Now, I tried to limit my social media consumption because I'm not convinced that it's all too good for us. But every now and then, I come across something that stops me in my tracks. This is one of those things. There was an engagement online, and the moderator responded to some of the parents or the advocates online, and they wrote this. And the advocates were advocating for children who have dyslexia. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, it's not to bash any particular publisher or curriculum or what have you, but we have to lay bare the mindset that has existed within education for decades. There is an acceptable amount of failure. There's a certain amount of or a lack of success that's tolerable. And I think all of us, not just who are on this webinar, but all of us who have been in education or who have children have to wrestle with this. And I'm just grateful that this conversation was done publicly so that we could use it as an instructive device or learning tool. So it's sad that we've turned the entire education system upside down for 20% of kids. Now, you saw the statistics earlier that 1 in 5 kids likely has dyslexia, or it's on a continuum, somewhere on the continuum. Is that worth stopping and pausing? Because this system of education, not just in California, but across the country, most school districts will keep right on churning, whether or not we help these students. I can make a case that if we don't help these students, that there are systematic repercussions. It costs 4 times as much to service a student in special ed than it does in general ed. There are repercussions. But from an ethical standpoint and a mindset standpoint, it's important that we name, that we identify, and that we wrestle with the mindsets and the assumptions. What's the acceptable amount of loss for our students, or the acceptable amount of failure? And who would turn the whole thing upside down for 20%? Now, this is something that this moderator, who was suspended soon after, I think she's back now, I don't know, but she's suspended after this. She's kind of said the quiet part out loud. And I give her a lot of credit for it, naming it, but I wonder what that means for us. What's our quiet part? What's our acceptable amount of failure of kids who are unable to read? And is it worth turning the whole thing upside down for 20%? Similarly, and I know there's another social media post, but similarly, as I was engaging in dialogue, an individual posted this. It was fascinating to me. And their thesis was, it's not so bad. We're good. We really have to stop blaming schools and pointing fingers and wagging our, all of that. Stop it. We're just fine. We're just fine. Schools are not failing. There are a few kids who've got issues, right? But we're fine. And again, it's that 80%. So 20% aren't okay, but 80% of, now further down in this survey from parents, it said that most folks hadn't gotten results from, the school yet, from the previous school year. So they weren't sure how the pandemic, but the tagline, the top line was 80% say we're fine. Well, I question that premise, both in terms of the article itself. I thought there was a disconnect between the facts in the article and what the headline was. But this idea that 20% is okay, that we just don't need to service those 20%, I challenge that. And I don't know your context or where you're at, what school, what system you serve, what children you have, what community you represent, what organization you're part of, what government role you play. But I would submit, NAACP would submit that all our children matter, that 1 in 5 students not being able to fulfill their potential because of illiteracy is a crisis. Again, to each his own. I'm letting you know where we stand in the NAACP and also the organization I represent Fulcrum, which is full and complete reading is a universal mandate, absolutely believes 100% of kids. According to the research, we can get 97% of kids reading if we apply the science and the research consensus. I'd like to share something with you, if you don't mind. Sometimes we talk about reading and the approach to instruction, and it's very philosophical, ideological. But I want to share something with you and briefly make a comment on it afterwards. This is a teacher who's recording herself, and then she published it as an exemplar for what you should do in this particular model of instruction, this reading recovery support that she's providing. This, in fact, is a very popular approach to intervention. And I just want you to see not just what it is, but how this might support or not support a child who has a learning difference or a processing difference like dyslexia.
If they get away from the flood. Remember, we're not going to do that. Yep.
And raining for a
What do you think that word is? Pick your card up and put it up there.
eek.
Yeah.
Ran out.
Where did she run? Where would she go? Out what?
Out of the house.
No, but is that enough words to be out of the house? Rachel ran out. When you see the S, what do you think it would be? Out what? Outside.
Outside. Look at
Our. You can't. Why are you doing that? Quit doing that. Quit. You can't sound out. I don't know why you started doing that. Look at our car. Rachel
ran to.
Stop doing that. Stop.
Safe.
Is it safe? What letter is this?
Save.
You can't sound out every letter of that word. It's a word you just have to know. But what would make sense? They went to save
their toys.
Read this whole sentence again where it sounds good. No. The muddy what? What color is it? The muddy
brown water came in. It ran everywhere.
Ugh. Can you imagine if muddy water ran all over your house? Can you push that red button for me?
Share this. First of all, this was seen as an exemplar. This was posted online. This is an exemplar. I believe the program is Reading Recovery. And we sometimes are philosophical about reading methods and different approaches to intervention. We have a standard of what we think it is, but on the ground, in reality, those methods and approaches come to life. And when we highlight certain techniques, whether it's cueing or taking our eyes off the page or not attending to the sounds of language, when we do those things in theory, even if just a little bit, what happens is on the ground, it shows up in ways like this was an example of where a young person with dyslexia who is really dependent on trying to crack the code and trying to figure out how the sounds and symbols go together to create meaning, they're really at a loss. And so I just wanted to put that out there because our methods of instruction and our approach to intervention has to line up with what IDA said if we want to get the greatest number of kids reading possible. I oftentimes like to use this illustration. I find it instructive, let's just say that, that we oftentimes think of curriculum or curricula that skip steps as being evolved, as being chic, as being just aesthetically pleasing. And it may be for many, but to transition from that model, which you would see on the left, to something that means we're going to get the greatest number of kids reading possible, yes, we want it systematic, explicit, and direct. However, and we don't want to skip steps. However, many of us in many school systems that we have been engaged with at Fulcrum, we have found that school systems tend to go from the one in the far left to the one in the middle. They don't look at the amount of prep time that they have. They don't look at the systems and structures they have. And so they adopt things that, while sequential, systematic, direct, and explicit, are circuitous at best. And the students are exhausted and the teachers are exhausted on their way up the steps. Dyslexia, frankly, when you're trying to serve students with a diversity of neurotypical profiles and neurological differences, it can be challenging. The level of diagnostic support, the attention to detail, the attenuation to sound, and how they're graphing those sounds, the graph beams, and mapping and tracking and providing the diagnostic support and ongoing feedback loop, it can be exhausting. However, we need not make it more challenging than it already is. And so as we're designing our curricula, our literacy programs, it's important. Systematic, explicit, and direct also should be mindful of our systems that we have in place. What's our data analysis system? What's our prep time? What's our collaboration schedule? Are the things that we have to support this aligned with the curricular choices that we have, the intervention choices, et cetera? And so I often tell people, yes, the second and third one are sequential, explicit, systematic, and direct. But if you've got kids that if you're trying to get everybody to the top, you may just want to pick the one on the right. I'll just say briefly with this that my journey with understanding the elements of an effective reading program really led me to the American Federation of Teachers. It's one of our national teachers unions. They have really elevated this over the years. And I always ask people to kind of score themselves, or just to score their system and kind of see where they're at, right? Do they have all 5 of the 5 elements that AFT says you need to have an effective reading program? And I'll speed through this, but you'll get the sense. The reading curriculum is aligned to the science, the research consensus is explicit, systematic, and direct, delivered by knowledgeable teachers, aligned with the research consensus, and it's got all 5 pillars on early reading, the phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, and comprehension. Does your system have that? That would be 1 out of 5 so far. Do you have high quality professional development? That has to be there in an ongoing way. This is a great webinar. Wonderful. Thank you for Glean and SCOE for setting this up. And school systems have to ensure there's ongoing professional development that's high quality in early reading instruction, even if that means supporting secondary teachers. You heard Dr. Anderson talk about how Miss O was his high school teacher's 9th grade teacher. What if she'd never received the professional development? Given what's happened so far in education, we have to make sure that people all along the continuum, the K-12 continuum, have access to high quality professional development that can support their practice. So that's the second element. Third, are the materials in general aligned with the research consensus? Fourth, are the assessments appropriate? Are we screening children to identify risk of reading failure? And this is what AFT says. I'm sure there are other things, but these 5, you got to have these 5. And is intervention timely? Are we basing our cadence of intervention on our assumptions? Is there a discrepancy model at play? Or do we assess students in a formative way because it's just that unit? Or in a coherent sequence that's laid out ahead of time, we test skill development. That way we make sure that it's timely and that we don't skip people because we didn't perceive the need. I want to give you, so that 5 out of 5, hopefully everyone here has 5 out of 5, but if not, I would urge you to go to AFT's website and make that a chart forward, a path forward There's the plan. IDA knowledge and practice standards, as well as these 5 elements from AFT. This, you all have probably heard about Mississippi's growth and over the years and how they really began to support young people around literacy. Well, this was the Teacher of the Year in Mississippi. And I wanted to just wanted to name this. Yes, she went to Mississippi State. She got her website there. Tally Tales is another free plug for her. And you know, wonderful individual. And there's this. In addition to her studies, university studies at Mississippi State, she also did some other things. And there is a level of diligence that we have to be willing to apply if we're going to be able to reach all kids. Certification as a dyslexia specialist means that you're digging into the things that most of our universities just aren't supporting us with. You saw the list of accredited IDA schools. It wasn't very long. So a willingness to engage, and then state support or district support to do these things, whether it's the provision of a stipend or some sort of support so that people have the have some compensation to value their time, is critical. To close us out here, there's one thing I'd like to show. And I have a decision to make, whether I have the 6-minute version or the 2-minute version. I think I'll do the...
Go for the 6-minute.
Go for the 6-minute. Okay, thank you. Okay. Here we go.
Continuing 4's dyslexia season now with dyslexic criminals.
Polmont Young Offenders Institute near Edinburgh houses over 400 teenagers from all over Scotland. Many of them started offending while playing truant from primary school. By the time they came to Polmont, they were seasoned criminals.
Currently serving a 2-year sentence for assault and robbery.
For death by dangerous driving. For housebreaking and drugs. For serious assault. Permanent disfigurement, severe injury.
Car theft.
Car theft.
Car theft. Misuse of Drugs Act. Assault and robbery on a shop.
For assault.
I've been a bad boy.
Jane Kirk and Gavin Reid believe that undiagnosed dyslexia may be a significant factor in leading to juvenile delinquency.
There is a body of evidence which suggests that dyslexia is fairly prevalent in young offenders, but there's some people who refute that and say it's no more prevalent in the prison population than it is elsewhere.
To settle the dispute, Jane and Gavin are going to test a random sample of 50 of Polmont's inmates. The suggestion that there could be a higher rate of dyslexia inside prison than in the outside world meets with open scepticism from the head of education at Polmont, Les Wiley.
I don't think you'll link directly dyslexia with major criminality statistics, I'll be honest.
If Les Wiley is right, the computer screening will pick up between 2 and 5 dyslexics from the random sample of 50. It's time for the computer screening to begin. The computer test comprises 100 simple questions and takes just 15 minutes to complete. Jane is watching for behavioural clues.
He's using the arrow as a prompt.
Harry is serving 9 months for handling stolen goods. He mouths the words as he reads, a classic sign of dyslexia.
Do you write with your left or right hand?
James, a burglar on a 2-year sentence, must read the questions out loud to understand them. That's another sign of dyslexia. Mikey's had lots of educational support, but this is the first time dyslexia has been identified. He's upset it wasn't diagnosed earlier.
I feel cheated. See, a few years of my life, see at school. I think that's fair. So I went through hell at school, know what I mean?
Could I just say something which I think is very important, and that is that you've got to really look upon dyslexia from now on as a positive thing, in other words, a good thing. You've got to try to say, right, okay, how could I move on from here?
All I can think about is when I was at school and I couldn't do as good as I'd done, and
well, you're quite
and
right.
they never done a wee thing like something, just a wee thing on a computer like that, and it tells I'm dyslexic. They couldn't even do that at school for me.
Says you are dyslexic, that you process the information in a different way. Did you? Did you?
Ryan, sentenced for armed robbery, is bitter when he's told the news.
You not feel that it really explains some of your difficulties?
Well,
Because
if that's the case, why wasn't this fixed before we are given the opportunity to do something about it? No, I mean, it's a shambles, and it shows you the society we're living in, doesn't it? That's not right at all.
it's very true.
The study is complete. All the volunteers have been tested, and the final results are in. 25 out of 50, that's half our random sample, have been diagnosed as dyslexic. It's an extraordinary result. The study suggests that undiagnosed dyslexia is linked to juvenile delinquency.
I'm going to stop it right there. 25 out of 50, quick math, it's half. That tracks with the data in the United States, both in our juvenile incarceration facilities as well as the adult incarceration facilities. And I showed you this from Scotland because this is across demographics. I know that the accents may have been difficult to pick up, but you got the gist of it. This is something that affects everyone. And the question that the young man gave, I believe his name was Mikey, he said, you mean in a computer test, 15 minutes, that's all they took, it could find out I'm dyslexic, and they couldn't even do that for me. What is our screening process? Do we screen children for dyslexia, or do we wait till they become incarcerated? Now that's 15 minutes. It took 15 minutes. This is, you can tell this is an older video. Clearly technology is much better now. We can go even more efficiently now. We have tools that are much more advanced, but even then we're able to identify things in a relatively short period of time. So I just want to stop and really kind of wrap this up by saying the reason why I ended with that clip was because I think there were some key things that were brought up there, not just in terms of half of the young people who were incarcerated were dyslexic, but the bureaucratic mindset of the people in charge. You heard the gentleman, Les Wiley, who said, well, I just don't think that you'll find much dyslexia there. And, you know, there is this bureaucratic mind that we want the machine to keep growing. You saw it in the 80%. With the F&P moderator said, why would we turn the whole thing upside down for 20%? That there is, so we have to fight those bureaucratic tendencies that institutionalists have, that things are going okay, and I think everything is okay. Well, if we're looking at the kids and what they need, we soon realize that they're not okay. On the flip side, the good news is students who have dyslexia are the proverbial canaries in the coal mine. If they're getting what they need, if they're provided with the direct, systematic, explicit instruction, if the what is there and the how is there, then you can get as many as 97% of kids to read. And that's according to the research. You look at schools, whether it's Kentucky or California or you name it, like that's what people can do. It's not easy in general to get kids reading, but it can be done. But if they're okay, if our programs are structured in a way that provides for the needs of students with dyslexia, then we can be assured that everyone will benefit. If we want to get kids atop the steps, the question is, how can we get the greatest number? And by focusing on that most vulnerable group, we're able to get the greatest number to the top. So I hope this was somehow informative and providing you with a little clarity about how this connects with equity, about what dyslexia is as a neurological processing difference, and also how structured literacy is very, very important in terms of making sure that our kids are able to get where they need to go. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jessica and the SCOE team.
Thank you, Kareem. And it was beyond wonderful. That hour just flew by, and thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. We do have about probably a minute or two for some of the questions that came in. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention the companion document that we've created to accompany each webinar. The webinar companion document includes prompts to discuss after attending the webinar and additional resources to explore further content. And we'll be putting the link to that in the chat. And then the last thing that I'll mention before we start is just our survey. If you could complete the survey, that would be great. We love to hear how all these webinars are going. And I know this one will get amazing reviews. I'm so excited to see it. So let's get on to the questions that we have. Kareem, one of the first questions that came in is, how might a teacher support students that they suspect may be struggling with dyslexia if they're in a school system that's resistant to assessment and evaluation?
Well, this is the beauty of and the power of being a teacher. So, there's the overt things that you can do, and there's the covert things that you can do. The first thing you have to do is document things. You document their needs. Second thing you do is that you have, and that comes from formative assessments, whether it's using the Dibbles or some other screener, some sort of diagnostic tool where you can really figure out, where the gaps are. Then you have a conference with the students' parents or their family, and provide them with specific information about what's needed. You've got to get the process started in terms of referring them for additional services. But what you want to do more so than anything is you have to provide them access to a solid foundation. And if your classroom doesn't, if your school system doesn't provide materials for strong foundational skill development, you've got to identify where those tools can be found. Either it's supporting through special services, or it's referring them somewhere else, whether it's providing supplementary support or referring them to some other opportunity that can get them. But that's the key. What are they hearing? And then how can we develop those foundational skills? And oftentimes, if you're in a district that doesn't provide a foundational skill component, maybe they use Lucy Calkins, for example, but they don't attach a compendium, or Wit and Wisdom, they don't have the Wilson's part foundations with it, whatever it is, if that's missing, you've got to figure out how to get them that specific set of skills to be developed.
What are the most effective school tools to screen for dyslexia, and do they differ between elementary school and secondary?
There's a lot of different tools, from the CTOP to the iReady to the Shaved Screener. Some are easier to use than others. I know Lexia's got a tool. There are a lot of different tools. I don't want to just endorse one, but I would say you might want to start with the Shaved Screener. I know Palo Alto Unified uses that. If often what you're really looking for, you want a tool it's got to be valid, right? It's got to be a valid tool, but you want something that gives you information about the sub skills. You don't just want something that says, oh, you're a level K. That doesn't really tell you what is K, right? But if they say this student has a challenge distinguishing this sound or this blend or this diphthong, whatever it is, that's the level of drill down you need. So any tool that can provide that, and I don't know if your system will have those tools available, but you let your principal or your coaches know, hey, listen, we need something that can drill down a little bit more finely, so that we can provide specific support to kids in the areas that they need.
And one last final question we'll slip in. There's some confusion over who does test for dyslexia. Is it pediatricians, some people are told? Is it teachers? Is it school psychologists? What's the final word on that?
So I'm so glad whoever asked that, bravo. So remember, students have a right to a free and appropriate public education. So how do we know what's appropriate unless we're screening them? How do we know? Do we just guess and throw spaghetti at the wall? So whose responsibility is it? The school is responsible. The school system is responsible for providing a free and appropriate public education. Many of them would say, we don't need to screen to know that. We just do what we do. As a parent, you have to be vigilant. It is not a default setting for many school systems. They don't just screen. There are some states that require screening now, but not all do. I think there's about 30 at this point. But if you're not in one of those states, and your school system or your school district does not do that, I got news for you. I got news for you. That's when you have to pass a hat around the family. That's what we had to do. That's not an answer I want to give. But if there's anything that's worth advocating for your child over, it is this. And so I would say, yes, encourage your school psychologist to do this. You can write a letter and say, I want my child tested. I want my child screened. You can do all that. I demand. You can go for it. We did that, and the delays and the delays and delays. Finally, my wife and I had to decide, you know what? It's not worth it. We're waiting, but while we're waiting, our child is sinking further and further behind. And so at a certain point in time as a family, we had to pass a hat and say, let's just get her tested. Let's get her tested. And we found out way too late, I would add, much, much later than it should have been, that she was dyslexic. My youngest daughter was dyslexic. So yes, it's the school system's responsibility to provide a free and appropriate public education. You can write those notes to the principal, to the teacher and to the principal. Write those notes. And if you got good principals and teachers, and if you have people who are responsive to the community, they'll engage with you on that and they'll provide those services. But if not, I would say fight, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for your kid. You got to figure out how to make sure that you get them the help that they need.
Well, Kareem, this is the last, that's all the time we have for today. That was the last question. And I want to thank you for your time on behalf of Glean Education, Sacramento County Office of Education, and the California Dyslexia Initiative. And thank you to our wonderful attendees who take the time after their workday to join us. We look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar with Rebecca Silverman on supporting struggling readers within an MTSS framework. And that's on January 12th, 2023. So please register for that event. Thank you again, Kareem. This was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.